Hey everyone, and welcome to Learning Rust, the series where we learn a new programming language, in this case Rust, together. So in this episode of the series, we're going to be taking a look at function calls in Rust. So we'll go ahead and open our example in source main.rs. And the first thing we'll look at is a very basic function in Rust. So just like our main function, it begins with this fn keyword. But this is basically just saying that it's a function. And then we give it a name. So a lot of this is C++-esque. So we give it a name, in this case print func. Our parameters will go inside of these parens when we have them later. In this case, this function doesn't take any parens. Doesn't have anything to return, right? So it doesn't return anything. So it's like a void function in C or C++. And then the curly brackets denote the body of the function. And in this case, the only thing in the body is this print line, where it just prints out this is the print from a function. And so we end up calling this in much of the same way we would do in most other programming languages, right? Where it's just the function name and then the parens. So the next kind of function we have, is a little bit more interesting. This one actually takes a couple parameters. So in this case, a little bit different syntax in C or C++. In this case, we do the whatever the parameter name is, right? And then the parameter type. So in this case, we're passing in x, right, which is type i32, and y, which is type i32. And again, the body of this function will just end up printing these two values. So it prints out the value of x and the value of y. And again, the way that the print formatting works, it's a lot like f strings in Python 3, right? So where we do these curly brackets inside of our string, right? And then we go ahead and positionally put in x and y, and those will replace instances of these curly brackets. So the one last example we have for these functions in Rust is this return func. So this is a function that takes one parameter, right? Or it has one parameter here, which is x, which is a type i32, but then it returns an i32, right? So this is how we specify a return type in Rust. So right here we're saying here's my return func, takes one parameter, and it's going to return an i32. Now it's important to know here that when we're returning in Rust, we don't use a semicolon, and that's because semicolons denote the end of a statement in Rust, and a statement doesn't return a value. What we really want to do is return an expression, right? So we want to return the expression x plus 1. So you can think of that down here at the call site, right, where we have let x equals return func 10. You can think of return func being replaced by the expression x plus 1 here, right? So if we put a semicolon here, right, then we have a statement, right? So it'll you'll end up getting an error here. So if we go ahead and say put a semicolon here and make it a statement, we see that we end up getting the linter ends up yelling at me. It says mismatch types implicitly returns and just empty parens, as its body has no tail or return expression, right? So there's no expression at the end of the function, just a statement. And so we fix it by getting rid of that semicolon. Right, so our body of our main function is pretty simple. We'll call our print function, our function that takes a couple arguments, and then our function that takes an argument and returns an i32. We'll use that to initialize x, and then we'll just print the value of x. So as with all our other videos, we're going to be using CORGO to do all the things like building and running our applications. So we can do something like cargo build, which will go ahead and build the unoptimized and with debug info version, and we can do cargo run to run it. So here we see, right, print, this is a print from a function. The value of x is 10, the value of y is 37, and the return value of x is 11. Or one of the interesting things that I found with Rust, if we go ahead, let's go ahead and do cargo clean, and then I go ahead and go back into the source and then main.rs, is that it really doesn't matter where we put these functions, right? So in C or C++, we typically had to have the definition of the function, right, above its use, or we had to have a function prototype above its use, basically telling the compiler, hey, you're going to see a function that looks like this later on. But in Rust, we just need to make sure that the function is defined somewhere, right? We don't need to, strictly put it above its use. So I could take all of these functions, cut them and then paste them and put them below function main, and I can do something like cargo build, and it'll go ahead and build, right? And so I have noticed maybe a little bit of, there may be some compile time difference depending on where you put your functions. especially if maybe you put them after their uses. It may increase compile time. That's at least what I got from initial impressions, but that may also be incorrect, so I'd have to look at that more. But the key point here is that, right, there's not this strict ordering where you have to either have your definition or function prototype and then the definition below someplace when you're calling these functions. The functions just have to appear somewhere. It doesn't necessarily matter that much where they appear. All right, and so we can go ahead and run this one as well. So we'll just do cargo run. This time, let's go ahead and build the release version. Right, so now it goes ahead and prints a release version, does the exact same thing. So that's going to go ahead and do it for this video. As always, if you want to follow along and look at any of the code that we're learning together in this series, you can go to github.com/coffeebeforearch. Then under repositories and learning Rust, you can go ahead and find this. So we looked at functions today, and then in source, you can find it main.rs. All right, so that's going to go ahead and do it for today. As always, I'm Nick, and I hope you have a nice day.